Does steroids do that? Maybe. Is roid rage a thing? I don't know. Maybe it just makes you more of what you already are.
Scott Steiner, in his and brother Rick Steiner's recent WWE documentary, said he has never failed a drugs test when he was confronted with the question of, have you ever done steroids? So, he an interesting way of getting around the question, but it's true, he's never failed one. He reportedly, back in WCW, skipped shows when he knew there would be a drugs test. So have you ever seen that meme with the black guy pointing to his head and sort of say, hey, you can never fail a drugs test if you don't take one?
I didn't see that particular. I know the guy who's just like, got to think about it, or, or I got a great idea. This is where, I put a lot of, I guess, empathy and compassion and a lot of my takes and my perspective with a lot of things. But this is probably going to be the most neutral, maybe the most apathetic to how the audience looks at whatever, because these are adult men and women that are choosing to do this kind of stuff. And obviously in pro wrestling, pro football, pro sports, in Hollywood, just use your eyes. The eye test will tell you everything you need to know. And especially if certain people are getting in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and especially 60s and 70s, and somehow gain muscle, look better, look leaner, have more energy, all this stuff and everything. Working out, dieting, proper rest, as I know from personal experience, can only get you so far. This is where sometimes the necessary evil of doing these, and I think there's different classifications of why people use steroids, or let's talk about this too. You know what the most famous out of any steroid question is? Like steroid questions to pro wrestlers, pro athletes, and Hollywood people. They're not lying, but there's omission that they do. And I'll explain why. Like you said, they ask a question of whoever. Hey, have you ever used steroids? No. They straight up say no. But there's never a follow-up question of what? I'll let you guess, James.
Well, there's so many follow-up questions.
Have you ever done human growth hormone?
Yes.
Which is incredibly expensive to test for. The NFL just started but they were avoiding it. I don't know if wrestling has ever done it. It's an incredibly, at least at the time I was researching it, it's an incredibly expensive test. And when you look at that kind of stuff, you can virtue signal and do whatever. But steroids and growth hormone are not street drugs like cocaine, like other things. Even marijuana is not classified as one of those kind of drugs anymore. Same, we talked about it last week in relation to pain pills and drinking. I would prefer people do that. Now, that's injury-based stuff that people are usually smoking or taking CBD, CBN. Steroids, in a lot of ways, too, are mainly used for recovery. And as you get older, obviously, TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, because every person, man or woman, their testosterone or whatever levels that they can achieve muscle, fat loss, health, it goes down a little bit. Now, you can solve that with your environment, with your diet, with your training. But with somebody that wrestles 300 days a year, or a football player that needs to get out there no matter what and needs to heal, and there's another drug in the NFL that's been abused to the hills legally, and we'll get to that in a second when I finish this thought. But most of the wrestlers, I personally have never seen it. I'll start with that. I've never seen it. I can go off my eye test or experience, or when you ask somebody, they kind of laugh at you or whatever. More than anything, it's nobody's business. Like in a locker room, like we're not going to ask. It's whatever it is. And it has nothing in a way to do with a push or lack of push. It doesn't hurt, or it can hurt you. They told me, if you can manage to gain 20 pounds by the next pay-per-view, man, we might have a spot for you. Oh, so what you're asking? No. They stopped me right. We're not asking you to do that. We didn't tell you to do that. But we're not asking you to do it. And now we'll just walk away. So with that being said, it's all a choice, but it's a choice of an adult that knows the consequences in 2024. It's not a performance enhancing drug in the way of wrestling and Hollywood. Pro sports, that's a whole different story. You can have an edge in a lot of different ways, and I'll let you go.
Well, let me ask you this, then. Do you consider bodybuilding a sport? I'm sure a lot of them do, and in that case, it is a performance-enhancing drug.
Well, in bodybuilding, the look and the muscle and whatever there is, and there's politics involved in judges to have their favorites no matter what. So even if you did it, you still might lose because the favorite or the guy who or girl who's going to get the sponsorship with the major, wheat or supplement or whatever back in the day, that factors into a lot of the judges' score. Wrestling in Hollywood is aesthetics based. Now, obviously, in both there's performance, either with stunts, physically perform the fight scenes, long filming hours, long travel days in wrestling, along with long live TV, live pay-per-views. It's an incredibly taxing schedule. And that's more of what I think people start using it for healing their injuries, recovering fast, and of course, keeping their muscle as they're not living a very healthy lifestyle. I think Billy Graham, we mentioned him last week, Billy Graham was probably, and still probably is, the most outspoken user of steroids and performance-enhancing drugs, and probably the biggest star to really, in a detailed way, admit to doing it. Hogan, we just talked about Hogan. Hogan kind of flipped on Vince during the steroid trial. That's when Hogan admitted to it. And then he went on his little tour with Arsenio, kind of talking about it and everything. I think Savage, during an Arsenio Hall interview, man, Savage is, I know I mean change subject, but Savage, you want to talk about an incredible ambassador to pro wrestling when it comes to those mainstream talk shows back in the day. When he's asked if he cries or he ever cried, and he gives an inspirational answer. Steroids, admits to steroids and doesn't recommend it for young people out there. Just a short, 60, 90-second soundbite. Not the and that's a crazy question, and I did a little bit back in college, but I never touched it after that. I got to give it to Savage. He's had some of the most, how should I say it, raw, honest answers for the toughest questions ever asked to pro wrestlers. You can bring it up with the clip.
I was actually just, I can't remember the guy's name. Periodization, the bodybuilder guy. It's something periodization.
Oh, Mike Israel or something like Renaissance periodization, right?
Renaissance periodization, right? He did a great interview with Jeff Nippard. Who I like watching, Jeff Nippard, and he said, well, what about the emotional issues about steroids? We're going to talk a lot about steroids and other stuff, and your experience doing testing as well beyond. But he said, or Jeff asked him, aside from, roid rage or spots of your balls shrinking or whatever, from steroid abuse, what are the day-to-day issues that you have or that you see you have by using performance-enhancing drugs for bodybuilding? And he just basically said, well, my confidence is really low and it affects my sleep and I get depressive thoughts sometimes, but hey, my body looks good. But it was a great answer because
great looking casket.
Yeah, it's a great answer to why you do it, and ultimately he doesn't know why he does it, except for the fact of the aesthetics, which don't make up for all the downfalls of abusing steroids in the first place. But it's almost like a mental hook to not only taking them, but to looking a certain way for your own confidence, and especially if you're on TV every week, in your trunks.
But think about the trap, the oxymoron, what you just said. Everything with the steroids and the aesthetics of it and what you look like on TV or look like in general, it actually amplifies your insecurity when you're off them, which means a lot of people will never come off them. And that could be the most dangerous thing you can do. It's dangerous to do at a certain point. We use the word tap dance a lot, or a game of chicken. You're using steroids. How much is enough? How much is too much? How often is often enough to get the benefit? How often is too often to endure the side effects? A cumulative effect, an immediate effect. And let's not forget too, human growth hormone, from some studies, it'll activate your muscle growth, but it'll also potentially activate negative cells like cancer cells. Your everything starts to grow. There's certain people that are, we mentioned last week, where their forehead grew from growth hormone. It's a lot of different stuff. And then you get into, okay, well, I'm doing it 10, 20, 25, 30 years, however long, or even if you just use it a year, your body's going to go back to exactly what it did before. Then what's going to happen into your, well, low testosterone is affecting men in their 20s now. What are you going to do when that synthetic replacement for your natural testosterone production is eliminated? And maybe you don't get the shot, that whatever kicks it back on, or you keep doing it and that shot doesn't work. Now, I mean, there was some people I saw like talk about throughout the years, like bodybuilders and stuff, when they had their testosterone tested after like, say, 20 years of steroids, growth hormone, and now they're hitting their 40s. One of them had like a level of 3, another one, 10. And I'm like, my God, I thought it like 343. Mine was low. I got way more, but you literally shut off natural testosterone. So what's that going to do to your depressive disorder? What's that going to do to your insecurity? What's it going to do that you start working out harder with less results? That you start dieting stricter, less results? Or like the guy from Renaissance Periodization. Man, I have trouble sleeping. I have thoughts that are pretty dark. Now you got to fight a whole different battle as you're just trying to work out, diet, and get enough sleep. Then the stress of money. You invested all this money into that stuff. Now what's going to happen when, okay, now I got to get dialysis. Now my health insurance is going to go up. Now I'm not making enough money because I don't look like I used to. Dude, these are all the worst kind of choose your own adventure type of scenarios. And they can all hit you at once. You can get some, you can get one, or you can get everything coming down on you once. Like a famous real American sin, when it all comes crashing down and hurts inside, at least you look good on the outside. Did we get content ID for that?
It was pretty bob on. We might actually.
I actually, no, forget it. I was going to tell you a story about content ID and just like humming the song. Anyway, picked it up. That's not the point. Right. As far as the companies go, we're going to talk about not just WWE. We're talking about entertainment companies, WWE. I'm going to give an example. Our version of Gladiators fired the head gladiator, right? And he was called Shadow, right? He fired him, did a steroid test, got rid of him. It's an entertainment show. It's still performance-based, but it's an entertainment show. But does WWE, does any professional wrestling company of any note or anything like this have a moral standpoint to set a good example for especially children watching, saying that performance-enhancing drugs are wrong and we do not condone it?
I've never seen an actual ad campaign like the Be a Star, Don't Try This at Home. I can't recall any dedicated.
WWF did in the magazines.
They did Jesse Ventura, of all people, saying say no to steroids. And they had, this is actually a magazine campaign that they did, yeah. It may have been on TV as well, but I think we're talking late 80s. Terry Taylor, the Red Rooster, was in one.
So you're talking about that? You don't think that was after the steroid scandal? You think that was before it?
Weirdly, came around 88, just when steroids were made illegal in the States.
Do you think that was proactively trying to say, well, we got a campaign where we're against it. Our hands are clean. And who, Dr. Zahorian, get out of here. What the hell are you doing here?
Oh, no, the comedy of it is that I don't think Zahorian was thrown out until about 1990. But they had, they actually
so
did
for
start
2 years, they asked him very nicely, hey, can you stop? Like, no, don't. What's that over there? Don't. What's that over? Don't. What's that over there? You got that joke, right? I'm just going to look over here as I tell you don't.
That's genuinely what it was. I think they had Zahorian there till maybe 1990. They started drug testing in 88. But they were doing it for recreational stuff. I mean, that's actually how they got Don Morocco. They actually used that as an excuse to get rid of some of the old guard. And
that's what I was going to say. Yeah. What's the circumstances with the Gladiator guy? Did he want more money? Was it political? Did they want to get one of their favorites in? Did he have heat with the office? These are tools They don't, and wrestling is not exclusive, and Gladiator. The NFL does it too, I bet. All pro sports. If you want to bring a guy down or an athlete down that you don't want to pay, that could be like, let's start drug testing them. Let's look at the morality clause in the NFL, which is a joke because they keep people that commit far worse crimes than just trying to, stay healthy. But
if you say that you're gay, then you're out of there, baby. Well,
what's that?
That's how it used to be. I'm sure morality clause in the NFL also covered sexuality. So if you were gay, you basically had to hide it, and then you could only come out after your playing career was over.
Yeah, I mean, those kind of clauses in there. I'm sure WWE, I think, has one now, a morality clause where they can basically look at that. That's even if Vince wrote that, that's funny. That's good comedy. But getting back to the actual thing with the steroids, and you're talking about testing. I was tested a lot.
Well, just before we get to the testing, I do apologize to interrupt you there. I want to ask one more thing that sort of relies on piggybacks off the moral standpoint is, does WWE, and obviously they had external pressure, it started from Eddie Guerrero, we know, at least in the 2000s, it was a response that he brought in the wellness program. But does WWE or any other company like this have an obligation, do you feel, to protect people from themselves to a point?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think the main reason management should exist, and we're talking about from a physical standpoint in the ring, we talked about the Jacob Fatu splash the night before a pay-per-view. This is where management has to step in and say, no, you can't do that. Well, I've done it a million times. Well, you did it 1,000,001 the next night and end up hurting yourself. What if you did that on SmackDown? Where would we be for the next night? Now this kid hopefully isn't that hurt, but the steroid thing, see, WWE, Hollywood, even pro sports are really in a corner. Because obviously you don't want the bad press of a rash of people dying supposedly from years and years of steroid use. You're talking about the Eddie Guerrero thing. Then, even with the Chris Benoit thing, they lumped in steroids and blamed steroids for that tragedy, where it could have been a whole bunch of other extenuating circumstances, including the brain of a 93-year-old, from had Alzheimer's. So there was a great deal of mental issues and maybe emotional issues there. And we talked about the Mike Webster thing from that documentary League of Denial before, where he was cold. He was cold in his truck, and his kid came out and said, "Dad, what's going on?" Well, he said, "I'm cold, but I just don't know how to solve that problem." Like, that can have you make very bad decisions, very rash, emotionally charged, almost rage-induced type of mood swings. So does steroids do that? Maybe. Is roid rage a thing? I don't know. Maybe it just makes you more of what you already are.
So we're going to be talking about the policies of the WWF and WWE across the years. You joined in 1999 with the WWF. You remained with the company for 9 years or so, where you left in 2008, at which time there was a seismic change within the company at how performance-enhancing drugs were looked upon and treated. So in 1999, were you made aware, if any, of WWF's testing policies?
No. I wasn't made aware of it. I think you could take one look at me and say, we don't need to tell that guy about it. But I wasn't made aware of any of that stuff. Also, later on in my time there, they tested me extensively. I remember, and people can doubt, this is where unbooked catering between myself and Danny Doring as a joke. Because a lot of times we were flown in, or local shows we would drive if it was in the Northeast, and we would go there and they would say, we don't have anything for you today or whatever, or you wouldn't know until after 4, usually anyway, when they come out of the production meeting. But we would be tested probably for about maybe 6-8 months. I was tested every single week to where it was a joke. It was just a joke. I was in really good shape, but I wasn't a huge guy. I didn't raise any red flags. I didn't gain the 20 pounds required before a pay-per-view. None of that happened. And during even so, he was, at the time, he was very depressed with ECW and lack of opportunity and lack of bookings. So Doring was in the worst shape he's ever been in. He admitted that, and he got himself in good shape after his release. But for them to test myself and Doring so many times, I'll use my I'm raising my eyebrows for the audio crowd.
I wonder what they did with all those samples that you gave them.
Well, there's two different ways of looking at it. You go get more nefariously, where a lot of people, and there's been different tricks that I've heard, the Wizinator and all these other things where you put the deal in your pant. But now they had people go into the bathroom with me, which that's a problem for me. I can't, I can perform out there in the ring, but if you're standing over my shoulder and I got to pee, that's maybe too much information, but I'm sure everybody out there, I get incredibly shy about that. So that's where my insecurity comes up. Not to the point of wanting to do steroids, but to the point of not being able to pee.
Okay, right. So let's talk about the testing straight away then. So 2006 onwards, the wellness policy is implemented. Talk us from beginning to end how you're picked for testing. Well, I mean, you were picked every week, but how you're picked for testing, what the testing consists of, any other rules, like if you can't go straight away, do you just have to stay in the room? Do you come back later? Everything that you can remember.
Usually it would just be like that one session of just waiting. They understand. I mean, sometimes they back off and go to a far urinal where they can still see if I'm doing the switcheroo or whatever it is. And then they would even, I think a couple times, they check your fingers because some guys would do the bleach dip or something for the masking. These are all things in the locker room, hearing these types of things. I just had a pee, which was hard for me to do. But I remember, I'll talk about talent meetings. I think it was Dr. Black was the guy's name, was the head of the wellness policy testing. And there was a lot of talent meetings in the beginning. And I appreciated Dr. Black and even talent relations and Vince for having these meetings that were very, very tedious, because you have a lot of questions. Because the boys are kind of also, there's some legitimate questions, and there's some questions that are, use the term mask, once again, that are masked to see, is there a way, is there a loophole, is there some, like a lot of guys would sit there and go, I have low testosterone and I'm planning to get on TRT. And then Dr. Black would be like, you're 25 years old. It would be really quiet. And then I would even say like, I'd be like, this isn't for me. Like I would get up and be like, it had nothing to do with me. Just get me when it's time to be tested or whatever. But those talent meetings were very informative. But then again, just my personal observation and my personal interpretation, there was a cat and mouse game to try to figure out where the loopholes were, what the unspoken thing was. And of course, this is where I was very, very vigilant, because there would be, and we can see it now. Let's just use our eye test once again. Right now, it's August 7th, 2024. Okay? After WrestleMania, I would watch certain people's physiques change. Then, leading up to the Rumble or immediately after the Rumble in WrestleMania season, I would see a lot of physiques change. Now, there were guys, too, that I would see either, you could say they were on the whole year or they were off the whole year and they just had great genetics. I couldn't tell. I mean, quite frankly, at that point, 2006, I'm just looking over my shoulder like, are they going to, they're going to release me and maybe being tested so much saved my job. This is pure speculation, because from 06 almost to 08, when I wasn't out with the injury or the vocal cord implant. Oh, and as a matter of fact, when I live in Connecticut, they came to my house a few times.
Really?
And surprise drug test me. Right hand. It looks like a left. Yeah, they came to my house in Connecticut a couple times. I think a minimum of 2 times in a month. It was like in the same month, I think, when they were, forced to test people randomly or whatever. They came to my house and tested me. And I was
You
like,
moved
dude, you
shortly
guys are
after that.
wasting your money. That's what I said every time. Because the guy would look at me and go, why am I here? And I was like, well, I don't know if I should take that as a compliment or insult. Like, I do try to look good. If you think I look that crappy, like I was expecting the Grandpa Simpson thing. They come and they hang the hat on the hat rack, do a loop, grab the hat, and walk right back out the door.
Injuries and coming back. It seems that a lot of people, not to point fingers anywhere, but a lot of people, especially this year or last year, have been away for a while and then turning up bigger than ever.
I suggest everybody do the eye test. And like I said, I'm absolutely, besides the fact I don't want anybody dying early or having enlarged hearts or having any of the difficulties afterwards, but it is a choice. So largely, I'm very neutral and apathetic to it. It's just, it's your choice. I chose to do what I did, or not do, more specifically. And did it cost me opportunities? Like Ben Hameen always says, the side effects of steroids is fame and money and a WrestleMania match. Okay. Well, what if you do all those things and none of those things come? What if I did a ton of steroids and I was the most jacked dude out there, but I still have the inherent ability to put people over, and I'm still not going to be in any better position? And there's nobody telling me, don't do that. There's nobody telling me to do it. So it's my own fault. There's nobody telling anybody in the NFL, NBA, baseball, Hollywood, but if you want to be Thor for the next 4 films and make $100 million for all the films, if you want to set up your family for life multi-generationally, we're not telling you to do it, but this guy's a great trainer. He can help you with your supplementation.
One more thing that I want to ask you before the wellness program we're going to go through is, was there any evolution in the testing, the PED testing or anything else in the WWF in the early 2000s before Eddie Guerrero? Because as far as I can tell, the testing, there was testing in effect, but it was very, very targeted at people they very much already suspected had issues.
I think it's one of those things, like I said before, how much is too much? So in that way, not only how much is too much as far as your health and longevity, but how much is too much to get that red flag raised? That's kind of what you're saying. Like the people, and let's look at it this way. If they want, I said it before, I think still the number one reason they will drug test a talent, besides, dude, you gained 50 pounds in 2 months. This is on the radar of mainstream media. We want to avoid that. So you need to go home for 30 days, get clean, and we'll test you. So, but I believe it's more a political thing. If you have heat with the office, if they're looking for a reason to get rid of you, the drug testing, just like the NFL, if they're looking to cut you, not have you, if you're up for another contract and they don't want to pay you, and that can take a little bit of your trade capital or your free agent, like market capital away, that's what they'll do. Pure speculation, but an educated guess.
I also wanted to mention the recreational drugs. I think maybe it was more around the recreational drugs. If they thought someone had a problem, they test them, then they'd have an excuse to either fire them or send them to rehab or whatever. A couple of names, I'm not telling any tales out of school here. Someone like a Brian Christopher or a Sean Waltman or someone like that, or a Marty Jannetty, who's someone who's outwardly had issues with pills, whatever it is, before, and openly spoke about it since. Wellness program. So, as I said before, reaction to the death of Eddie Guerrero, who died at the age of 38 from heart disease. I'm once again probably not telling any tales out of school. Too much steroids, too many painkillers. The painkillers were a reaction to a car crash he was in WCW, I believe, where it just spiraled out of control. He was fired from WWF, brought back, you know the story. Then WWE implemented the wellness policy program to once again start testing all performers regularly that they hadn't done since maybe the mid-90s, 96, around that time. A lot of the stuff you already know, recreational stuff, the performance-enhancing stuff, certain prescription medications without a valid prescription, which is something else we can talk about. And the testing was regular, random, unannounced, so they claimed, and independent from WWE. It was a third party, bunch of people who were dealing with this. Consequences for violations were a 30-day suspension without pay for a first violation, second violation a 60-day suspension without pay, and third violation termination of the performer's WWE contract. Once again, that occasionally was interesting depending on how much of a main eventer they were. So prescription medication as well. That's an interesting one, because with prescriptions, I mean, surely it depends on what kind of doctor you have and what you're asking for and how reasonable it sounds. As far, and everybody's in pain. So talk about the prescription issues with a valid script and that kind of thing.
Well, I know that was one of the questions that came up in the wellness policy talent meetings many times, the script. I know they kind of, Dr. Black, if I can recall correctly, was kind of like erring on the side of moderation. Like, don't raise a red flag that you have a prescription for 10 somas a day, or there's no possible prescription for that. But if you're asking for refills, and they're pretty aware of that. So you can go to CVS and they know, even when I was on my antibiotics and all the other stuff, not just talking about painkillers, muscle relaxers, I'm talking about the actual oral antibiotics, even the IV one. If I went in to get the refill too early, because while we're at Target, we might as well see it a couple of days early, no go. You got to wait till the end and that's used up, and then you can come get it. And that was during a time when there were still like shortages in supply chains. That's why we were trying to get the antibiotics a little bit early so we were covered. But they definitely are very stringent about not refilling prescriptions early. I don't know about back then. I would assume there was a little bit of abuse, and then they got caught, and then there was a reactive rule put into place with that. I don't know about, like I said, I haven't witnessed the pitfalls of prescription drugs personally, like going to a hotel room where everybody's, doing drugs or anything like that, or even in the locker room. Nobody would be just popping pills immediately after the match. Didn't witness any of that. I will say this too, the marijuana policy, it was hypocritical in a way. Now I hope they laxed it, but before, the guys would famously save the royalty money or T-shirt money or whatever it might be to pay the $2,000 or whatever it is fines for the marijuana violation. They would just fine people, and then after a while they would suspend them. But I don't know how many fines would have to happen before a 30-day marijuana suspension, which means if you just keep fining guys and they keep paying you and keep doing it, and you go back into this vicious cycle, you're not trying to protect them. You're just trying to find them for, you know what I mean? The punishment that you're trying to get people to stop doing marijuana doesn't fit the actual supposed crime. That it's not a deterrent. It's not a deterrent to make people want to smoke.
Do you know they actually put marijuana as one of it was a prohibited substance, but they actually, if you were caught, then immediately you were given a 30-day suspension again. So they didn't do the fines after a while. They actually put it onto just the same as steroids or anything else.
Have they let it up now? Have they relaxed?
I guess so. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure they have, because was it Liv Morgan? I can't remember who it was. It was in Florida, and she got caught with prescription marijuana, and she was arrested. I might have got the name. Yeah. Everything. Was it Liv Morgan?
Yeah. She was. I don't know if it was marijuana, but she was caught with something, and then it just kind of went away. Which means the cops really jumped the gun in putting that mugshot up. Thank God that it didn't hurt her career, because if that timing was wrong, they could have completely released her, and then one of, I guess, the strongest storylines right now in the company wouldn't have happened.
It's like Rob Van Dam and Sabu. They did it at the wrong time. And
right after he won the ECW World title, right afterwards. Yeah. And it really was. It was marijuana. There was nothing else in the car, correct?
No, there were pills as well.
Oh.
So, in fact, I've got it here. Rob Van Dam and Sabu got caught with some weed and some Vicodin and some other unidentified pills later found to be controlled substances. And then immediately WWE went into action and booked Rob Van Dam to lose the WWE Championship to Edge and the ECW Championship to Big Show. within a span of a few days of each other, I seem to remember. Did you, in later years, I'm going to give you a couple of examples, because Triple H is obviously one of the examples, but afterwards, he wasn't on a full-time contract. He's got an office contract, not a performer's contract, I imagine, so he's not subject to it. Brock Lesnar, I always thought, was an interesting case because he was popped for performance-enhancing drugs in UFC. And then he had his win over Mark Hunt overturned, I think, or at least it was no contest without me looking. But then he goes straight back.
The results came back after the pay-per-view.
Yeah. And then he comes straight back to WWE and then never fails because in his contract, he is not subject to testing. He's the only person not subject to testing, still, most likely as well, assuming they still do test.
I don't think that's accurate. I think if you look at Vince and you even look at Hunter, people in the office, full-time employees or management, I don't know. I didn't see the rules. We're just looking at how they're applied. I would assume part-timers. I would assume outside celebrities. And I would assume people that are employees within the company. Now, you might get around that and have some kind of legitimacy to say, we are going to test for cocaine and street drugs and other things, but these, and let's look at it this way, all these guys might have a prescription for it. They're all in their 40s, 50s, Vince in his 70s. Sure, why not? You go, and Signature Pharmacy back in the day was one of those places that used a lot of latitude to supply a lot of people with that was the age of the wellness clinics, the anti-aging, and they were all here in Florida. They were not subjected to, I think, the same kind of scrutiny, at least at that time, because they were elective, insurance didn't cover them. There was a lot of things that they could do that weren't allowed by a standard doctor. That's my guess.
Just to clarify, Brock Lesnar popped twice, tested positive for an estrogen blocker, clomiphene, during his last UFC run. So I suspect that is a masking agent that he popped for.
Yeah, I don't know too much about it, but I do know that the fight between testosterone and estrogen as men get older, people can use their eyes or think, well, I'm just talking about the actual interaction, and I might just assume. You could take testosterone and then use the estrogen blocker in order to make sure that the testosterone works to the fullest of its ability. Like I said, I'm not an expert. Or you can just take the estrogen blocker to prevent the testosterone from being overtaken by the estrogen and not be on steroids.
Because you mentioned the Signature Pharmacy scandal, I'm so glad you did. I'm going to bring it up. It happened in 2007. So for people who don't know this or remember this, or somewhere in the back of your head, this would be an issue with up to 20 contracted WWE talent who were supposedly getting banned substances from Signature Pharmacy in Florida. Where was it based exactly in Florida?
Not quite sure. I think it was in Florida, though.
Okay, then. So I'm going to give you the names. I won't give you everything else about it, but it's going to come back to a couple of the names anyway. Charlie Haas, Chavo Guerrero, Edge, Funaki, Gregory Helms, John Morrison, Mr. Kennedy, Randy Orton, Umaga, William Regal. Now, these were all mentioned in Sports Illustrated's article. There was a few names that weren't mentioned on the Sports Illustrated article, but were mentioned elsewhere. It was Batista, Chris Masters, King Booker, Booker T, Santino Marella, and Simon Dean. And then 5 people who were either no longer under WWE contract or deceased: Brian Adams, Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Johnny Stamboli, Sylvain Grenier. So, I butchered his name pronunciation, I realise that. I just wanted to mention that Booker T, his name was implicated not in the Sports Illustrated list, but he has said it was a mistake. I've never ordered from there. He's been very public denying it. Whereas someone like Mr. Kennedy, Ken Anderson, went on the Sun's Wrestle Talk, or not Wrestle Talk, WrestleCast, or whatever it was, from years ago, and says, no, I don't take this stuff anymore. Actually, wellness policy helped me get off steroids. And then a few weeks later, he turned up on the Signature Pharmacy scandal list and basically went back on the Sun's podcast at the time and said, yeah, no, I was lying about that. Yeah, I absolutely take it. And that basically heralded the end of his WWE career. So what do you remember of the Signature Pharmacy scandal at the time as someone in the locker room, and how devastating it was? So many people got suspended.
Yeah, I don't remember too much of it, honestly, because it was kind of not talked about backstage. And what year was this? I want to be accurate that I was there.
2007.
Okay. So this could be a time when I was really recovering from the vocal cord stuff, the throat stuff, doing everything there. I might not have been at TV each and every week in order to kind of hear, people talk. The boys are going to talk. People are going to figure it out and talk about different things, or maybe some people getting their stories straight. I don't know, but I don't think I was there each and every week for that. And obviously, I'm not within that circle anyway. When I went to a TV, house show, pay-per-view, most times I would get catering, go right up to the skybox and play video games. That would be the course of my day. So the gossip and getting involved, you know what you do when you're in a locker room? Like, say I was sitting there, and this was famous, like Steve Lombardi, Harvey Whippleman. I don't know who the new stooges are, basically. I don't mean to use that word for them, because those guys have contributed a great deal to the business and done very thankless jobs for the company. So when they were workers and managers, so they're in the locker room. But say I'm sitting there and someone is talking about, man, I like Mr. Kennedy, hey, I lied on this podcast. I don't know what to do, and I'm about to get popped. Lombardi would come up to me or somebody in any way and be like, hey, what do you think about Mr. Kennedy with steroids, huh? Pretty effed up, pretty effed up. And I would have two lines that would get me out of every stooge's trap. When they would say, hey, man, oh, man, he's going to get in trouble. What do you think about that? And I go, everybody's got their thing. And then if two people are fighting about it or arguing or doing whatever, hey, whatever, fuck you, F you, or whatever. And they would be like, what do you think about that? Who do you think was in the right? And I'd be like, I think it worked out best for both parties. That is, for any young wrestler, how do I survive 10 years in WWE? Those two lines will get you pretty far.
Last question about this is...
I'm sorry that I don't have more detail. Like, I saw him sticking a needle in his ass before doing flat bench at the gym. Belt squatting 1,000 pounds.
Listen,
more plates, more dates. So I'm told.
But yeah, he did. He's actually an excellent YouTube channel. He did a lot of stories on that stuff. I think his name's Derek. More plates, more dates. It's a YouTube channel.
Oh, right. I was just saying it's the phrase. I didn't realize there was that.
Yeah, but there's a YouTube channel that talks about steroids, performance-enhancing drugs, Hollywood, sports, wrestling, all that stuff. Chicken, rice, and broccoli get you far.
Absolutely.
Diet 50%, so I'm told, because I've never dieted in my life.
5 cc's of chicken, 5 cc's of broccoli.
Okay, this is a big question, and I suspect you don't have an answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you think there is the same robust testing in 2024 that there was in 2008, or whenever they had the most robust testing?
Well, they don't advertise or tout it or talk about how the wellness policy is such a great deal. Like, they would use their PR campaign to talk about, like, how they're clean, their athletes are cleaner than the NFL, their drug testing is enforced better than the NFL. Vince and WWE take great pride in saying, now I'm not saying it's non-existent, but I will speculate. Like I said, it's pure speculation, not defamation or anything like that. I will say that they do seem to have a time calendar when they're real strict and a time calendar when they're not. What does your eyes tell you? Get in trouble together. Come on, James.
Well,
I was just thinking, the last big suspension I remember was years ago, and it was Roman Reigns, if you remember this. But
that was a completely supply chain guy. Remember, that guy, I think, was in Florida too. Was
Really?
that during the COVID era? When that
COVID
name,
era.
there was a guy that actually got arrested, got busted, and that's how they, I believe, got the names, including Roman Reigns.
Here we go. No. This is way pre-COVID. Roman Reigns suspended in 2016. Where does the time go? The last major suspension I remember, and I don't even think they made a big deal of it, was Matt Riddle. But they don't just, I don't know if it's just like they're just cleaner nowadays, if they are a bit more lax nowadays. But I remember back in the 2010s, there used to be someone popping every, getting a 30 or 60-day suspension every other week, it seemed like. And now these days, you just don't hear of it very much.
Well, I would dare to speculate once again. Thank you for the correction on the date. I got to start getting my dates right. But with that being said, like back then, there was pressure. Back then, they were on Nancy Grace, Larry King. They were on Fox, CNN. There was still, even years after the Eddie unfortunate tragedy and then the Benoit tragedy, there was still some kind of leftover vigilance looking at pro wrestling for a while. Now I would say with the Matt Riddle thing, did they bust him? Was this another political thing where Matt Riddle had heat, or Matt Riddle was becoming a problem to where they had to send him to rehab? Because think about it. He was drawing money. He was drawing money as a singles. The kids loved him, and he was drawing money as, what was it called? RK Bro?
Yep, with Randy, yeah.
He was arguably one of the top 5 most over guys in the business at one point.
So, yeah, he was suspended first 3 months of 2023 after failing a drugs test. The explanation given on television was that Riddle was recovering from injuries after being attacked by Solo Sikoa, and he then completed a 6-week stint in rehab. But then with Matt Riddle's an interesting case, because wasn't there like a video like in an airport in it coming back from India or something like that, and he was being a bit loud, and I don't know if he had a few cocktails or something like that, but that seemed to be the final straw for WWE, and they used that to get rid of him.
He was sexually assaulted by the TSA or something, correct? Or
yeah. And then he came out with that.
Well, the funny, I got to give Matt credit because he did an interview not long after, I guess he started wrestling again at MLW, other places and stuff like that, and started winning independent titles. I remember he had the belts on the desk. Ariel Helwani interviewed him, and he was just like, he admitted that he was like, quote, acting a fool during a certain part of time at the end of his run in WWE. I encourage people, after you watch this, the whole thing, comment, like, subscribe. How you like that, James? Check out that particular interview, because I think it definitely shows that he takes a lot of accountability for his mistakes.
I've got the quote here. Honestly, I thought it was going to be fired a long time ago, Riddle said in a recent interview with Ariel Helwani on the MMA Hour. You're allowed to smoke weed. I went to the strip club and did some cocaine a couple of times, and I failed a drug test. It was cocaine each time. Man, I sort of just missed that wrestling from the 90s style. Strip clubs and cocaine. What happened to that?
Would have been in Vince's limo with Bruce at one point.